All right, I want to welcome everyone to this Memory Symposium IAP event, and a little history as to how it came into existence is that Boris and Martin Dressler, who was his PhD supervisor at the Donders Institute, they work on memory. They published an important paper in Neuron recently on the cognitive effects and the neurophysiological signatures of memory training on a group of experts, people who trained, and naives, all three categories, right? And they invited me to a conference out in Berlin. We spoke, it was great. It was a conference that was totally focused on memory training, which is unfortunately a small community, but the day after, he gave this workshop. So I actually attended this 5-hour workshop in Berlin, and it was outstanding, and I immediately said, you gotta come and do this here. So I've invited him, and I also invited Martin, who's not here. He's at the Media Lab right now. But tomorrow, for those who are interested, they're going to be giving their more academic talks at 10:30, I can't remember, 10:30 in the morning, and 10:30 to 12, I think. But today, I wanted him to show you guys memory in a hands-on fashion. So he's going to basically teach you, and it works, trust me, because I just did it, take you from like 7 items to 50 in one afternoon. Now, I know some of you can't stay the whole time. You can go in, you can come back out, that's fine. But for anyone who completes it, you will be up to 50 by the end of the day. Whether or not you want to stay there is up to you. You have to decide whether you want to put the work in. And our teacher here is actually uniquely qualified to present this type of workshop because he is the only human being on the planet, at least to our knowledge, who both has a PhD in neuroscience and who is a world memory champion. I don't know you finished first, but you're up there, right?
With the team, yeah. With the team, I won it. So
the team you won it, and you've been ranked as high as what, 2 or 3 or 4?
4 was the highest ranking individually.
You just finished 6th in the Worlds recently. That was done in Vienna. So really a unique character. So I'm going to turn it over to him in 1 second, but I just want to make a couple of other comments. And one is, we couldn't have a workshop telling you guys, oh, we're going to improve your eyesight 500%, or we're going to improve your reaction time 500%, regardless of your age. It would be wonderful if we could, right? We can't, okay? We can't do that. But we can promise to improve your memory by 500%. So that's kind of interesting, right? Why is it that we can improve your memory so much and we can't improve the other things? What does that say about memory? And in truth, this shouldn't be that surprising because we do have great memory capacity for certain things, right? An expert golfer like Tiger Woods, he may not be have a PhD, but he walks off the course, he can tell you every shot he hit on the golf course, right? Because that's his domain of expertise. For narrative, for stories, for autobiographical information, something vivid happens to you, you won't forget it. So we do have great ability to retain memory for certain information, but it's information that somehow is made relevant or important to us. And that gets to the essence of these techniques, which date back at least 2,500 years to ancient Greece, where you make information which otherwise has a neutral valence into something that has some sort of resonance with you. And if you can pull that off, right, you find that, wow, your memory capacity swells to a ridiculous extent. So the final thing I want to leave you with is, well, if this is such a big deal, why is nobody studying it, or very few people studying it? That's a good question. And that's why having this workshop and some events, because I can guarantee you that outside of Boris and I, this will be a neuroscientist-free zone. Because in general, they do not believe in memory training, with the exception of a few back there, Kartik, Puya, aspiring graduate student Amanda, Diego, and Fred. So with that, I want to turn it over to Boris, and you are going to be in for a very interesting and entertaining workshop.
Thank you, Robert. For a moment, I started to believe you're going to give the workshop now, but that's cool. So who of you thinks he or she has a really good memory? By show of hands. Okay,
Raise your hand with
sure.
you in the room.
Right. At this moment after this introduction, I get it, no one dares to raise their hand. And I still find it quite interesting, that regardless where I come and how I'm introduced, that very few people would say, yeah, my memory is really good. Most people might say, oh, it's okay. And many even think, well, it seems to be quite bad. It seems to be getting worse and worse. More and more people have their own partners' names tattooed on their bodies. Yeah, out of love, I hope. Or is it fear sometimes? You never know, right? So it can go wrong, though. Might not be the best solution. You can see that here. I tend to think there should be better solutions than that one. My own journey into memory sports started when I was still in high school. I heard about memory techniques, and I thought, hey, this should be useful being a student and later at university. But I also heard about this memory sport, that there's competitive memory. And yeah, I find it quite interesting. Interestingly also, it's not super well known. It's changing a little bit, at least in some parts of Asia over the last years. Let me give you a small anecdote. It's a World Memory Championships. It's an annual event, it's once a year, but it's a World Championships 5 years ago. Mongolia, a country with just 2 million people in Asia, for the first time ever had a whole team competing. And they immediately achieved rank number 3 in the nations table, in like the medals table. As a country, they got third. And to honor that achievement, when they flew home, they were welcomed in Mongolia at the airport by the Mongolian Prime Minister in person. The captain, the head of the memory sports team, as a memory athlete, was Sportsman of the Year of Mongolia and is a judge at MGT, like Mongolia's Got Talent, something like that. The Philippines got second. When they flew home, they were welcomed by national television. They were later invited to the national parliament, and the best of them have full-time scholarships to be professional memory athletes. My team, Germany, we won, number 1, yes. And that is title defending team. I was picked up at the airport by my mom. Local news brought such a long article, but sadly misspelled my name. Yeah. Well, I don't want to complain too much. I have the chance nowadays quite often in different countries actually to show what my sport memory is actually all about. And before I teach you a lot, I wanted to give you a little demonstration at least. And for that, I brought this deck of cards. It's 52 playing cards, typical poker deck. Can you shuffle cards? Can you shuffle them for me, please?
Try.
At every single memory competition, the very last, usually the final one, the 10th one, will be to memorize the order of a shuffle deck of playing cards as fast as you can. So it's 52 playing cards, the typical poker deck. You have to memorize the order of all cards, which are in a random order. Shuffle a bit. Do you want to give it another quick shuffle? So what do you think? How long do I need to memorize these? Those who don't know what's possible, at least. Thanks. No one dares. Well,
5 minutes.
yeah, 5 minutes. Okay. 1 minute. Okay. Get challenging. 2 minutes. Okay. I like that answer. Can someone time me, please? Someone can take their smartphone or watch or whatever and time it for me. Over here in the middle. What's your name?
Emmy.
Emmy. Can you give me ready, get, set, go, and then time me?
Ready? Start. Set. Go.
Stop.
1 minute 16.
1 minute 16 seconds. Okay. 160. Let's see if it actually worked. Maybe I can give you the cards. Can you please don't drop them now? That would be unhandy. I'll try to name the cards from memory, top to bottom. So I'll try to begin at the top. And so after I said it, can you show the card around, please? So I'll start with this card. And that should be 4 of diamonds. 4 of diamonds. Can you see it in the back, or is it too small? You can. Cool. Okay. 4 of diamonds. And then we have the 7 of clubs. And it's a 5 of clubs. It's 5 of hearts. It's Jack of clubs. It's Ace of hearts. It's King of spades. king of hearts, ace of hearts, 9 of spades, 6 of clubs, jack of hearts, 8 of clubs, jack of spades, Can you put that one to the side? I don't remember the next one right now. So put it to the side, but afterwards, so now the next one should be the 6 of diamonds, right? Okay. And then it's ace of clubs. It's 4 of clubs, 7 of diamonds, 5 of diamonds, 3 of diamonds, 2 of hearts, 6 of hearts, 2 of spades, 2 of diamonds, 7 of hearts, ace of spades, 8 of hearts, 10 of hearts, ace of diamonds, 2 of clubs, 4 of hearts, jack of diamonds, 10 of clubs, 9 of hearts, 10 of spades, 6 of spades, 4 of spades, king of clubs, queen of clubs, Can you put the next one to the side as well, please? Then it's a king of diamonds, 5 of spades, 3 of hearts, ten of diamonds, 3 of clubs, 9 of clubs, queen of spades, 8 of diamonds, 3 of spades, 8 of spades, and 9 of diamonds. Okay, thank you. Let's see if I can find the other two back. Of the first I left out, is it a diamonds card? Is it diamonds? Is it a queen of diamonds? Okay. And the second one, king of clubs, queen of clubs. Can you tell me just which symbol it is? Which symbol is it? Diamonds, hearts, clubs, or spades? Seven of spades. Thank you. Okay, nice. 1 minute 16. That's okay. My best in competition actually was 30 seconds. So in competition, the mode is a little bit different. You actually get a second deck of cards, which is pre-ordered, and then you have to put it in the order of the deck you memorize. So if you have like 6, 7 gaps, you see which cards you're missing. So it's way easier to fill in gaps, so you can go a bit faster. And I wouldn't repeat. So this time I repeated to make sure I would leave that out. Actually, 30 seconds is pretty good. The world record by now is even less than half of that. So it's under 15 seconds by now, by a Mongolian student. The American record is also like 16 seconds by a medical student from somewhere in the Midwestern. So that's a task, of course, we like to demonstrate because it shows what you can achieve with memory. It's also interesting that many people seem to assume there's a number of people around who can do that really fast and we just show it off. But of course, that's nowhere near to be true. It's really important to know that this can be trained, this can be achieved. Well, not everyone can achieve a world record, okay, but everyone, and I'm really sure everyone can learn to memorize a deck of cards in 5 minutes in a couple of days. I taught the workshop with Robert and Martin, you mentioned, who did the research with me. He never really practiced it before himself, and he joined the workshop, and at Christmas break he sent me an email and now did it in 5 minutes. And he had never done it before. So, and he's also a few years older than me as a PI. So that's just one of these examples. Before I go on, I would like to ask every one of you to quickly ask yourself 2 questions. To ask yourself the question, what is something where I feel my memory is doing well? What are kind of contents, what kind of material can I remember well? And then think of something where you think, well, that's hard to remember, that I tend to forget even though I would want to remember it, something I would like if I could improve my memory for. So this is 2 questions, something you remember well, and something where you really hope today maybe to learn some techniques to improve on. So we see some things coming back on both sides, that's interesting. So some people find faces easy, or not so much, or how to find a place. But there's also things coming back always on the good side, like imagery, stories. At least no one complained about forgetting gossip. So there's some clusters here and there. That's quite interesting. The names seem to be really hard for most people. Also things like numbers tend to be named way more often, to be difficult to remember, and facts, and also all the study book materials. At this place I don't want to talk too much about the brain, because on the one hand I think most people know a lot about it, and also we have a session about it tomorrow if you're interested in the science. What I wanted to briefly mention for those who are totally not from the field is that many people still have the idea of that memory is a place in our brain. Like they think in computer metaphors and think, well, the computer has a hard drive, the computer has some RAM, random access memory, and a processor, and then you try to find the things back in your brain. Even if you look in a dictionary, like I took this definitions here from Merriam-Webster, it gives 2 definitions, and one of the things it says it's a store of things, like defining memory like a place in your brain. And that's quite important to know that doesn't exist. So memory is not a place in your brain. Maybe even our field, neuroscience, was a bit guilty in making people think that, because 20 years ago when fMRI started to be a thing, we published all those papers with some blobs in some places of the brain and saying, here I found someone to remember names, here they remembered numbers, and people had the idea it's really like this place, which again is not true. It's always more or less the whole brain that's involved in those processes, and yes, of course, different parts of the brain might have different priorities and functions, but learning is really a process. Memory is really a process. It's not a location of your brain, and that's quite important. I briefly had shown this when in one of my courses at the Radboud University in the Netherlands. Medical students take a course with me on memory and the brain, and at the beginning of the course I made them give me a definition of memory. It's also you have this stored information itself that is being named, but also the place where. And again, this is not true. This is a little better definition. So again, in the dictionary, maybe the first one fits better than the second. What's more interesting and maybe even less known for some neuroscientists is how can we distinct memory? It's of course a whole field, memory research, and you can get different answers. But one level is the time level. And here we heard it back already. In common talk, you will hear people on the street talk about short-term memory and long-term memory. There's one more level though. First level would be sensory memory. And the duration of sensory memory is like under a second. You might say, Boris, well, how is that even memory if I forget it in a second? Well, if you look back at our definition, just the ability, the process to take up some information and then do something with it, it's still a form of memory. It's typically tested per sense with a task like the following. So probably you're sitting too far away from the screen. But if you would sit really in front of my computer and I show you a screen full of numbers like this, and I ask you to just look at it. And if I now click again, one of the fields will be randomly selected and marked in color red. One of the fields is randomly selected in the color red. You should tell me which number was at this location. Well, try it. Maybe you're sitting too far away, but let's try. So which number was at the field that's now turning red? Some guessing. Well, it was number 8. If you really sit in front of the computer and look at the screen, people tend to be able to do that. Even if I put a little delay in, 1/10 of a second, 2/10 of a second, people tend to be able to know it because you kind of still see it in front of your inner eye. If I make it a delay of a second, which is a bit more like what you have here, less than a second because of the distance and all the noise around it, you're not able to do that anymore. But it shows that we have kind of this sensory storage for visual information. And it turns out we have it for all senses. There's equal tasks they do for auditory senses, even for feeling, smelling, where you can show this kind of memory exists. But let's be honest, if I say I have this amazing program for you today, we'll, as Robert said, improve it by 500%. So we get it to 5 seconds. That's not useful at all. So it's just useful to know it exists, but it's nothing we can train on. It gets already way more interesting when we talk about short-term memory. Short-term memory, as we see it in science, is quite different to what most people who are not from the field would say. Because as you see here, I said short-term memory, so it's still under 2 minutes. So really short indeed. In science, of course, you can debate what is it actually. Often you will hear concepts about working memory. So not for the science, but for today, I'll kind of use these terms equally. So short-term memory for me is what you would also call working memory. And besides the short duration, it's also pretty interesting how the capacity is for short-term memory. And I want to test you a little bit on that. So now it's your turn. If you have something to write with you, that's perfect. If you could take it out of your bag, take it into your hand. Otherwise, try to do it mentally, but it works best if you can type it or write it. Which medium you use, I don't care. OK, the task will be the following. I'll give you strings of numbers, strings of digits to be precise. And right after I named the last digit, you're allowed to either write or type it in. OK? So I'll start with 4 digits. The first string will be only 4 digits long. After the 4th digit, write it down or type it in. OK? Then I'll give you another string, which will be 5, and then 6, so I gradually increase it, 1 per length, and we will see how far we can go. OK? So let's start. The first one is 4, 8, 9, 1. Write it down. OK? Next one. 2, 8, 5, 8, 3. One, 2, 6, 7, 0, 4. Next one. 6, 7, 3, 6, 9, 7, 1. Next one. 9, 3, 1, 4, 5, 3, 6, 8. One more. 4, 5, 3, 8, 0, 7, 3, 5, 0. OK, I'll leave it at this one. Anyone still confident in the last one? 9 digits? Maybe, maybe not. Everyone hopefully was confident with 4 digits. Did anyone think 4 digits was too much? No, so 4 seem to have been easy. Anyone who wants to name them, just to check it? Yeah. With 5 digits, anyone? Yeah, just, can you tell me what you have for 5 digits?
2, 8, 5, 8.
Yeah, that's good. Everyone 5 digits was still possible? Yeah, OK, good. 6, it might start to get interesting already. What do you have for the 6 digits?
1, 2, 6, 7, 0, 4.
Yeah, 1, 2, 6, 7, 0, 4. OK. For the 7 digits, over here, do you have the one with 7 digits?
6, 7, 3, 6, 9, 7, 1.
Yeah, that's good. 6, 7, 3, 6, 9, 7, 1. 8 digits, getting more fun.
4, 5, 3, 6, 8,
I didn't hear you really well, but people around are nodding, so I guess it was good. Okay. Can you say it a bit louder?
9314538.
Yeah, that's good. Well done. That's already quite difficult. Anyone with 9s thinking that could have worked or should have worked?
I don't know if I got it, but
Yeah.
343607350.
Not completely, no.
453.
One after each other. So what do you have?
I think I got 453807350.
Yeah, very good. Awesome. So 3-4 people getting excited. So some people managed to do it, but we see the graduation. So 4 is quite easy. 5 might start to feel, okay, I have to really focus, but it works. And 9 is already super hard. Interestingly, this is something that has been tested already quite extensively in the 1950s by an American psychologist named Miller. And the psychologist Miller already back then did something. Nowadays, we start to teach all the graduate students, but for quite a while was not so popular, to be quite good at doing PR for your science. Because his official paper, his official publication, which is one of the most cited publications in psychology ever, like tens of thousands of citations, is called The Magical Number 7. Because he finds if he gives this task to a lot of people, on average, people can do 7. The task is done a little different than we did it here, so I did a little more difficult than he would have done it. So if you didn't get 7, don't be disappointed about that one. But on average, people can do 7. But of course, our brain does not work on digits or numbers. If I gave you letters, A, F, K, P, you can also do on average 7. And if I give you words, bread, house, mill, pipe, you can also do an average 7. Because our brain in short-term memory doesn't have the exact material. It's more like pointing to the actual information. So it's coming from computer science. It's not exactly, of course, the same thing, but it's a bit like a pointer. You don't actually store the information, but to some place where it actually is. Interesting thing is, of course, he calls it chunks. It's called chunks then. If you start grouping your information a little different, you can already start to improve your capacity for short-term memory. Maybe those who did it really well with 9 digits already did it, because I heard about it intuitively, that in your head you don't repeat 9, 6, 3, 5, but you make it 69, 53, and already group it a bit together. Let's do one more. I'll give you one more row, which will make it more clear afterwards. So listen carefully. It's one more. It's not a long one. It's 9 digits again. So listen carefully. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, you don't have to write it down. Everyone could do 9. I made all of you geniuses. We were done for today. Amazing. Okay, maybe not. But it shows, okay, suddenly I hear, well, it's 1 to 9. It's one information. I could have added 4 more random numbers, and everyone could have done 13. So by chunking, by making it one information, it's a string of 1 to 9, it gets easy. If for any of you, for the 4 numbers, I picked your birth date, and you noticed, suddenly it's just one information, because it gets one chunk of information. And this is what you can do immediately to improve your short-term memory. But, of course, when we are sitting here talking about what we actually want to improve, it's really more long-term memory. I don't want to improve what I can remember in 2 minutes, but in 2 days, weeks, months, years of time. Interestingly, sorry, if I do the same task, 1 digit per second, a tiny bit slower than I did it, 1 digit per second, it's actually one of the tasks of the memory championships. The memory championships, we have one of these tasks called spoken numbers, where they read out a string of 1 digit per second. Afterwards, you have to write it down. No gaps allowed. So it's really hard scoring up to the first mistake. How many do you think the best can do? Can everyone raise their hand? Everyone raise their hand, please. Everyone raise your hand. I'll give you limits. If you say, that's too much, take your hand down. If you think, is 10 still possible? Okay, sure. Keep your hands up. 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. So one optimist. That's nice. One person went too far because it's 456 at the moment. No, not 500. 456, 1 per second. Does this mean this person have a short-term memory capacity of 456 digits? No, not at all. But he manages to do the task, like all the memory athletes do, directly in long-term memory. If I now ask you again about the 4 digits, probably it's already pretty hard. You already lost it. It's not there anymore because that's short-term memory. It's gone after 2 minutes. If this guy memorized, if I do, like I didn't do 400 in the competition yet, but I had like, I hope I'm not lying, I think my best in competition was like 180 in this task. I would still know all the 180 numbers the next day, and probably also 2 or 3 days afterwards. I don't know them now anymore. If there would have been a reason for me to remember them till today, I would have done so. But without doing anything else, I would still remember them a day or 2 days afterwards. Because it didn't go in my short-term memory. It went into long-term memory. Of course, long-term memory, again, isn't one thing. It's not one storage for whatever, but you can split it by material. This is some of the terms that came back at the beginning. If you look in a psychology textbook, Psychology 101 or something, in the memory section, you might have this picture. That we split memory in explicit and implicit. Often also the term declarative for the explicit one. The explicit one is all the stuff you know, and also that you're able to name, to declare. It's declarative memory. And there's also implicit memory. Big part of it is procedural memory. Maybe you learned to ride a bike. But if you now meet an adult who cannot ride a bike, and you tell them, well, it's easy, just like step on it and then you use the pedals, it's not going to help them very much because there's way more to it, which you can't declare, but you just learn by repetition to do. There's, of course, more to procedural memory, just one of the examples. Episodic memory is all the things, stored in episodes. A lot of it is your autobiographical memory. Things that happened to you. Events, as you said, you attended, things you experienced. These are stored like episodes. It's also, again, not just this, but it's a big part of it. Semantic memory, it's a bit like, we had like this trivia, quiz show knowledge is certainly an example for semantic memory. If I ask you, I'm German, do you know the capital city of Germany? Which one is it? Berlin. So I give you a cue, capital city of Germany, your memory gives you back one answer. Like it's a kind of direct pairing, capital city of Germany, Berlin. Interestingly, there's usually the way that memory comes in via episodes. If I ask you, what's the capital city of Madagascar? Okay, one person knows it. Good one. Antananarivo. So I guess most people didn't know it. Most people didn't know it, but now you heard it today. It's the capital city of Madagascar, it's Antananarivo. So if you happen to watch a quiz show tonight and they ask for the capital city of Madagascar, chances are you will know now the answer. Oh, today I heard it. One of the other people in the course said it. It's Antananarivo. So you still remember the episode as well. So you know the fact, but also the episode. Again, most likely you will forget it. You will not retain this information because you just heard it once or twice now. But if you happen to remember it in half a year, and in half a year you see this quiz show, and they ask this question, you just know, it's Antananarivo, but you don't remember anymore how you learned it. As right now, you probably have no idea anymore when did you learn the first time that Berlin is the capital city of Germany. But you did learn it in an episode. So our memory is really good in extracting information kind of this direction. When we now go to memory techniques to improve memory, we're working big parts on these things. Luckily, it's all the things you mentioned are hard to remember. That fall in there, like names. So foreign languages is often named as an example. Facts, that's often sitting here. And we can also help episodic memory with memory techniques quite a bit. It's much harder to help procedural memory with memory techniques. Not impossible, but I will not get 500% on that one. Like if I want to remember like a new dance, steps of dancing, or a song, these techniques are much less helpful. I will not have this massive improvement as I can have with the techniques in other material. To run the theory block up, it's also important to look at the memory process. It's not just one thing. We have encoding, we learned something. That's obvious for most. But then we also have consolidation. And for those not thinking about memory often, they forget that there is this thing. Our brain, even when we not focus, when we do not attend to information, there's still happening so much in our brain. Big parts of that is also while we sleep. My lab in the Netherlands, it's also one of the things we focus on in our research, memory and sleep. How does it belong together? What's happening during sleep that will make a memory durable or be forgotten? And also just to be clear on that, sometimes you read in articles, we never forget something we once learned, or we just can't find it back, not through a period. we forget things. Yes, we do, and a lot of that is really gone if we don't find it back, just as a side note. But of course, memory is then interesting if you can also recall it. So even if it's still there somewhere, but you can't retrieve it, you cannot recall it, it's also not really useful. So when we now look at memory techniques, we start by focusing on how to get stuff in there, in a way. And I like to use this image, and it's a bit of my model to guide you through the day. So I like to picture it as a house, as a palace. This term will come back. And in the roof, I have the word memory. And the memory I like to support. I like to have techniques that help my memory, that support my memory. And these techniques here will be these pillows, different pillows. One is the method of Loci, which we will look in closely. But there are different methods also for digits and names. So we will look into all of these. Before we get there, I'd like you to look at the bottom. All of these techniques are built on the same principle, on the same idea, visual thinking. And what the stress is visual, the sense of seeing something, visualizing, of course, is a bit more. You can also visualize other senses in a way. You can also picture hearing something. It's a bit weird how we use these terms, but I guess it's clear what I mean with that. So if I visualize something happening, I can also think, what do I hear there, or feel, or experience? And that's more the way I mean it. It's about what you make up in your mind. And I know some people think, well, yeah, but I don't see much. Does it work for me then? I remember quite well one of the very first courses in memory training I ever gave, quite a while ago. On the very first seat in the front, there was an elderly man sitting there. And I started giving a task where you have to picture something in your mind. And I saw him that he has troubles with this instruction. So then I gave him a hint. I said, maybe you close your eyes. If you close your eyes now, maybe that helps you. He then closed his eyes and said, now I'm seeing black. And I said, okay, that will be interesting. But then I learned that's not so special either. Some people have a very strong visualization skill. They really see it in their head, and others don't. But for what's happening in your brain, it does not matter. How good is that? And we find it back in our research. There are memory athletes who describe their visualization as, well, I don't see much of it, actually see it, but I still know I think about it. And that's good enough to get this different brain activation, get different connections in your brain. And it's all about the connections when we talk about learning. So it still works really well. All these techniques combined are usually called mnemonics. Mnemonic techniques. It's spelled like this. So I think in English it's usually, in America at least, pronounced often like mnemonics. You don't really hear the M anymore. English people often still say mnemonics. You still hear it a bit. It comes from the Greek. It is spelled this way. So I get to do interviews quite often, sometimes by email, and the journalists write me back, Boris, you put an extra M in there or an extra N. And no, it's correct. It's like this. That's a term used to describe all these techniques. And I want to start demonstrating to you that this makes sense by another task. So I'll leave my slide set once again and give you another task. So the question was, does it only work for things like numbers or list of words where something's really random and the order is very important? Or is it also helpful for things where order is not so relevant, like learning a new language? And the answer is, yeah, it's definitely still relevant. So you have the most massive effects, the biggest difference from someone trained to untrained, where the order plays a role. Like in things like numbers, if you really practice the method I'm showing you today, you can easily, within a few weeks, if you just spend a few minutes a day, improve your memory for numbers, for a string of numbers from a few to 100. So the gap is massive, massive, massive. But for learning a foreign language, you can still easily be 2 or 3 times as fast as without. So I'll show you quite soon actually how I use it for language learning. And the same is true for classes. So it helped me a big deal being a student, also for all the class material. I didn't finish 5 times faster than anyone else, but I still managed to do 2 quite challenging master's degrees in the time of 1. And computer science, I like perfect score in every single course I attended, and still had time to travel the world to do memory competitions. And I'm totally crediting it to the memory techniques I used for it. So yes, for order you have the strongest effects, but it still works for a lot of things. Okay, one more task for you. On the following slides, you're going to see pictures, images, 1 per slide. And I click through them quite fast. So really fast, actually. So extremely fast, but don't blink, okay? So your task is just in general say to remember these images. Are you ready? Okay, ready, get set, go. Okay. So it was 20 images. Can you remember them? How many can you remember? Let's think about it. Maybe 7, yeah, could be short-term memory capacity.
In order?
No, order is not so important. Usually people tend to primacy recency effect remember the first and last item, but in the middle it starts to get blurry. I actually claim that all of you remember all or nearly all of these images. Not in a way that you can recall them right now, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you images again. On the next slides you see 2 images at a time, 2 images next to each other, and I want everyone to join in. So everyone, no one skipping out, everyone join in and show me with your finger which one did you see before, which one did you see before, left or right, and also say it loud, left or right. So which one did you see before? Left. Yeah, sorry, yeah, so, yeah. Oh, this one again? Yeah, good job. There was one image, maybe I went really fast on that one, where people were not agreeing, but on the others I just heard a chorus giving the same correct answer nearly all the times. And if I had more time, I could have shown you way more images. Actually, there's a set of studies already from the 70s where they did a very similar task like this. And they started with groups that just did like 20 or 100 images. And they did a series of examinations of experiments. And in the longest one, they had volunteers come in 5 days in a row, a week, for a few hours per day to look at 10,000 images. 3 seconds per image, 10,000 images. So next Monday they brought them back, showed them 100 image pairs like this, and they had to say which one did they see, and people still scored 89% correct. 89% correct. That's how good your memory for images is. And one moment. They did it in different sets, like when they did sets of thousands, they did really close images, like I had here, but it's the same item, like a bottle with the closed or open. Like a shoe turned left or right, the same shoe, and still people had like 86% in this most extreme condition. If you do words, people still get over 50%, that's correct. If you do words, it's not a chance, but people were between 60 and 70%, so way less than for images, showing our preference for this kind of material. Still, of course, we also saw the effect that it's a different thing to be able to freely recall it, like name it yourself, or recognize it back. So, of course, there's still a difference in that. But I'll show you how you can actually use imagery to improve your memory. But there was a question first.
Well, does that not say that the magical number 7 does not really work as a concept, as a theory?
No, because
The fact that you can remember that many items.
yes.
And I don't think people were necessarily chunking or doing anything like that. So does that not show that the magical number 7 doesn't really work?
No, it shows that your brain is working on different levels. This is not really working memory anymore. As I said, the people watched the images for a whole week and came back next Monday. That's not short-term memory. Clearly, there's a whole weekend in between. So it's not short-term memory anymore.
Different from the numbers that we heard one after the next.
Because numbers, like implicit digits, is like just a variation of 10 of them. So if you really want to have the order of the string, you would use this short-term memory capacity, which is really limited in capacity, really highly focused, really fast, so it has a lot of advantages, but it's clearly gone after a few minutes. Well, this is more like an activation. You activate a specific pattern to see an image which activates something in your brain. And then if you see it back, you have the same activation coming back, and then you recognize I had that before. But then this is happening in long-term, not in your short-term memory. Robert has a comment?
The point is that for short-term memory and random items, without any practice ever, 5 to 7 is the number. But there's nothing, as you were suggesting, magical about it if you do any practice at all. But yes, if the number was more for generating publicity, which it did successfully, it's got like 50,000 citations, than it is as an absolute limit, which the author himself knew.
Of course, yeah. Like for him, it was magical because it came back for different kinds of material, and because it was a good claim to put on the paper to get attention. Okay, let's do the following. Let's get really into the practice of improving your memory finally. And for that purpose, I'll tell you a little story. Okay, so your task for now is really simple. Try to listen to my story, and if possible, try to see it in your head. Try to see it happening, what I'm telling you now. So try to follow the story, experience it. And I'll start with a pretty short example, so it's a pretty easy one. And the test, or the story, is the following. Okay, so here's my story for you. Really try to picture, try to see it happen. So what you actually see is still my image here. It's not going to change, but in your head, try to see it moving away, and you suddenly see a domain name, like of an internet address. An internet domain name is showing on the screen, an internet domain name. It's probably saying something like www.king.com, because suddenly the door opens and a king walks in. Maybe you see it at its close, that it's a king, and the king comes here in the front and says, "Hi, my name is Phil. I'm Phil. I'm King Phil, and I am here to teach you a class. I want to give a class." But King Phil is a bit bossy because he starts his class by giving a lot of orders. Maybe he orders all the people to sit at the table and not so far in the back, and he also orders specifically a family that's sitting here in front, a family of people that's sitting in the front to join him. There's a whole family and they have to join him. And then he goes to the family and said, "Well, I heard one of you is a genius." I said, "Right, one of you is a genius. Okay, but be specific. Who of you is it? I want to know who of you is it, be specific." Okay, short story, let's repeat that. A domain name pops up, a king walks in, telling you, "My name is Phil. He came to teach a class," which he starts by giving lots of orders. And he orders a family to join him. Then he said, "I heard one of you is a genius, but please be specific. Who of you is it?" Okay, what's my story for you? It's a short one to begin with. Well, could you follow the story? You probably heard I overstressed some of the words. And now I'll give you the story again, but leave out all the words I just overstressed. And I want to hear them from you. So I want you to shout it back to me. So what did pop up on the screen? Domain name, a website. The door opens, who walks in? It's a king. His name is? Phil. He came here to teach what? Class. Which he starts by giving? Orders. And he orders someone to the front. Who is it? Family. And one of them is a genius. But they need to be specific. It was easy, right? So it's still a set of random words, which was already over 7, so, well, 8 words, okay. With some focus it might still work, but with the story it was super easy. And you notice it's not just short-term memory. I hope if you check you in an hour, you'll still easily remember the story. But it wasn't just random words either. Congratulations, you just memorized the correct order of the 8 taxonomy ranks in biology, which go from domain for kingdom, phylum for Phil, class, order, family, genus for genius, and species for specific. And that's just a little example how you can use some imagery, a whole story, to improve your memory. So that was one example on that. And because this principle, what we used here, is quite important, I want you to focus on that now. So the words I used in my story, sometimes they were matching, like family is family, that's easy, and class is class. But there was also like a word like phylum, which you don't remember because of the name Phil. And you hear in your story genius, but you remember, okay, genus is the actual term. You have specific, but species is the actual term. And these words that remind you of what you actually wanted to remember are usually called keywords. And this is an extremely important point, because this technique shows that these keywords make it useful for tons of material. If you want to remember something useful, it might be pretty hard to have an exact image. If you study neurobiology, there's lots of terms which you probably don't have an image for. But you just have to find a keyword to remind you of it. Maybe you hear a name, it's difficult to remember, but if you find a keyword for it, that's good enough to remind you for it. And this is often called in the keyword method, in particular if people look at language learning. So the keyword method is something that comes back a lot in the context of language learning. So this is typically what people see if they want to learn words in a new language. You have a word that you want to study, like maybe in Spanish, cordero, and then it just gives a meaning. In your textbook, in your app, whatever tool you're using to learn the words, you have the actual word and then the meaning. Cordero means the lamb. Here's the idea if you want to use keywords for that. The idea is not even to look at the meaning, but only to focus on the to-be-remembered words. And now it gets Dutch, which was not the purpose. Sorry for that. Wrong slide set, I guess. But then you have to look here for a keyword. You try to find a word that reminds you of that. And for a cordero, for me, my keyword would be cord, like a cord jacket, a corduroy jacket. And now I have to combine it, the actual meaning with the keyword. So my image is a lamp wearing a corduroy jacket. And I picture it in my head. And suddenly I link my keyword in an image with the actual meaning. And it helps me to translate the words easily. So one more example, if I have iglesia, which means church, I might look at the word and see that the beginning of the word eagle that comes back in English, for example, in the word igloo. So my image would be maybe an igloo, which is actually a church, an igloo church, because iglesia means the church. That's the keyword method. Does it only help with like language learning in this way, like one-on-one pairing? Well, luckily you can use it for more things. If you want to remember the capital city of Madagascar is Antananarivo, you can use it on both sides. And then for Madagascar, maybe you need an image. Maybe you know the movie, then maybe the animals from the movie are an image for you. But if you don't know them, you look maybe for keywords lingually. So you maybe have mad and at the end is car, or maybe a mad and gas car, gas-driven car. Someone's madly driving his or her car, mad car, and sticking an antenna out of the window to maybe get some signal, but ends up in a river. For antenna and river, for Antananarivo as my keywords for the name. Important is, of course, the moment I want to remember it, I also focus on the actual term. I understand it's Antananarivo, and then I have antenna and river as my images. If I now think back of antenna, river, it will activate the sound because I heard it before, Antananarivo. So, for example, for this kind of material, it works really well just to link these images. If you make some more examples from Spanish, if you speak Spanish, okay, it might be easy now, but otherwise, go through it with me. If you have manzana, I want everyone to think for themselves what could be one or two keywords for manzana. Like, find something for yourself. You have manzana, what could be a keyword for manzana? Maybe you make it just easier, maybe you would think of man and sun. So maybe a man is knowing the sun outside and eating some apples for lunch. So man, sun, manzana is apple. Perro, I can't really say it. Diego probably can say it better than me. How do you say perro? Perro. Just doesn't roll like it should be. But perro, what could be an image for that? Like a pear, okay, so it would be two flats. So it's similar, so it could be good. So you think it's a pear? No, it's an apple. No, it's not so wrong, it's a dog. Sorry, we'll take it back. So it's a pear, and maybe you feed it to a dog. And it could be an image for that. So again, you have to link it afterwards, but pear, good example, good one. Montaña, maybe you say it sounds like mountain enough for me to remember, and then that's perfect. Then you don't take an image. So it's very important. When I used these techniques to learn languages, I didn't make an image for every single word I learned. For those where it was kind of obvious for me, it sticks the first time, I don't need any extra effort. But for the 30-40% of the words where it doesn't, I put in my image. So for montaña, that's how I say it, montaña, mountain, you might pick an image, or you think, well, it sounds like mountain enough. Hueso, bone. Try to find a keyword for hueso. Hue, as the color. Okay. And cerebro means the brain. Of course, if you know some of the terms, it's probably easy. If you think of different parts of the brain where you have the Latin words coming back, so that's easy. But maybe yugar, take this example, yugar. Can you give me a keyword for yugar? Like juggling, yeah, so juggling playfully. Yeah, yugar.
Like who is in the garden? Maybe they're playing.
Who and garden, who is in the garden playing there? It's my garden, or are they even allowed in there? Okay, who and car, who's in the garden? Yeah, very good. Yeah, but you see, it can be totally different things. because it's what's working for you, and it's totally different. For Yugar, I heard things like yoga, jaguar, so really different things, but all of them work if it's your image, and then you link it with the actual meaning. And the blue and azul, just for making you attentive, are switching sides. Of course, it's not blue that means azul, but the other way around. But can you find a word for azul?
Azure.
Maybe Azure, and then what could be an image for Azure then? So you can translate it, even if you have a term like Uega, it was Ugar, but because you have your image, it still reminds you of that. You're maybe not sure if you see it the first time, but you can guess, okay, probably there was a form of the word I had talked about, playing. So the dog plays with one. So that's how it helps you at least to directly translate from a foreign language into your own language. Going the other direction, that's true, is a bit more tricky. So at the beginning, it really helps you to understand a lot of the language. When I was in school, I remember this quite well, when I was in high school, before I started to do memory training, I was really bad in languages. I always did quite okay in math and the sciences, but in English, I always was like either failing or just not failing the class. And like my teacher told me, you just don't have a talent for languages. You're good in the sciences, but not so much in the languages. So I hope my English by now, even though if I cannot pronounce TH correctly, is good enough to teach a class at MIT, so wonder what he says now. And besides English, I'm also now fluent in Dutch and speak some decent Spanish and also some decent Mandarin Chinese. Mandarin Chinese, it's also a language where people think, well, how does it help here? I see it helps for Spanish, but how is it in a more difficult language? I want to give you an example from this app. It's called Sizzle. So the story behind Sizzle is quite interesting because it was actually founded by 2 students from Munich. And one of them was a volunteer in my training study. So he learned memory techniques in my study as a participant. And he liked it a lot. It helped him a lot. And his friend was a year in China to study and to learn the language. And when he came back, that's the idea to use his techniques to learn Chinese. What they say is, of course, if you want to study Chinese, as a Westerner, there's a little more than you have to remember than just the meaning. Typically, you have all these aspects. So you have a character. Then you have the meaning. You have the pronunciation, so you have to be able to say it. And you also have a tone. So Chinese is a tonal language. Some people here can explain it better than me, of course. But it means if you say the same word and change the tone, it can change meaning. Like if you have ma, it means mother. But if you have ma, it means horse. So it changes meaning by the way you say it. In English, we have it that if I say ma or mom, she gets, I have a question. If I say mom, she gets, I'm like angry. If I say mom, it makes it clear. But it's all just changing the tone. In Chinese, changing the tone can change the meaning or does change the meaning. Like ma is mother, but mar means horse. And so you also should be able to remember that. So in an easy example, you might have this character. So the first thing is you have a character. And then you hear the meaning, it's mouse. So your first step is make an image for that. Like maybe for you it looks like a mouse, a square mouse. Then you have a pronunciation, and it's pronounced ko. Ko. So you choose a keyword. Maybe your keyword is cold. So cold sounds a bit like ko at the beginning. And then you have the tone for the third tone, which goes down and up again. So they have the dragon as a character. So you put it all together and have a character with this mouth open because it's cold outside here in Boston. And so you remember it's ko, third tone. This character means mouse. And in their app Sizzle, what they do is that they have tons of these examples prepared to help you learn Chinese. Then of course not all characters are extremely simple. So some are, but then you have a lot of characters that are combined. Like this first one here means women. It's nu, it means women. So maybe you picture this looks like a woman with a dress, like maybe dancing. So in Sizzle they have an image of a woman dancing with a dress. It's like this. This one means child. So maybe you picture a child and in clothes, only the hands are sticking out. So this one means child, for example. But then you have a totally different character, which is this one, where you find bags that it's these 2 parts combined. But it's a new character. But you find it's these 2 coming together. This one, for example, means good. Something is good. And then you make a story. If the woman is with her child, she probably finds that good. So you know good is women and child. Then you have different other characters. Maybe you have this one, and maybe you have this one. And for example, see again, this is again this character for women, and this is one which is often for learners translated as roof. It doesn't mean anything by itself, but it looks like a roof. So maybe if you have in this story a woman under the roof, and it actually means peace or safety. So it's peace or safety. So if the woman is in the house, probably she feels safe. Or you have this character for kid, child, and under the roof, and this just means character itself, like a Chinese character. So you picture all the Chinese kids have to sit at home practicing all this 10,000 characters the whole time. I don't know if you can confirm or not, but I heard it's not so wrong, actually. So you make this stories out of it, and they get funny and creative. And then, of course, you have, again, all the words for that. So this is nu, which maybe sounds a bit like now, like maybe someone now wants to dance. This is like a th, so maybe it sounds like a bee flying around a child. This one, for example, means an. So maybe you picture the woman when she comes home, first thing she turns the light on, because it sounds a bit like an. And then you can build up characters and words quite quickly.
Are these methods supposed to be a scaffold while you're consolidating things, or are they supposed to become your long-term memories forever to bring these up?
Very important question. So more like the first thing. So they should help me improve encoding by a lot. So I can learn a lot of new information way faster, but that doesn't mean I will remember them forever. On the other hand, words now in Chinese, if I speak Chinese now, I'm nowhere fluent. I don't want to claim I'm fluent, but we, for example, had some small talk in Chinese before, and I had the impression you were understanding what I said. You can either confirm or not. I don't have to think about all my images for all the words. But sometimes I had to pause because I didn't know a word, and then I can try to find my images back, and quite often it helps. So usually the images stick way longer than the information itself, but like all these easy words like I used here, I know it right away. I don't need the image anymore. It's not meant to replace learning, just to add another layer by making so many more connections in your brain that even if you lose some of them, you still find it back. And also to have a mean to find it back, because, oh wait, I don't remember the term, but I should have an image for that, and it's way easier to find the image, the story back, than the actual information. Yes?
How do you mix up the elements of the image? Like, maybe you'll get to this, but like that first example, I think I would forget whether the word means mouth or dragon or cold, like the parts of the image, how do you remember what?
Yeah. So I think it's first thing is I think it happens way less than you might think now that you confuse it, because like the images you recognize back in the test I gave you before, you recognize these images back. And at the moment of learning, you know what they stand for. So I hardly ever have the feeling that I confuse them. I can still forget images and stories, of course, and I'll come to that, how to avoid that. But that I confuse them is usually not happening. Like in the sizzle example, all these characters, they're clearly for the tone. So by kind of the order where it comes into my story means that I won't confuse it. And the character itself is a cue, so it looks like a mouse to give me the meaning. So usually because there's an order also in the story, it feels quite obvious. So that I confuse it is nearly never a problem. Yeah.
I would argue it's kind of like recognition memory. When you pull up the entire image in your head and you have to tell a story again, you're much more likely to get that story correct than you are to start from scratch. So that's the way, it doesn't happen very much.
Yeah.
You don't get confused very often, but maybe surprisingly, but I think similar to recognition memory.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, do we have more questions right now? Yes, please. Martin.
So for my mom trying to learn English, she most of the time trying to label the English word using some Chinese, maybe Chinese, maybe something others. Then I found one issue for her. So whenever she was trying to talk to me, she, in her mind, she always tried to remind herself with the Chinese or whatever the hint is, and then go back to the English word. Basically, she has one more step to remember the English word. So for me, I'm not sure it's really helpful for her to really get the point of learning the language, because when we learn our native language, we don't really have the actual layer. So I'm wondering what is your opinion, or how do you view this?
So, important question. So if I have this extra layer, isn't it just like preventing the actual learning, like one more step? when we learn our own language, we also don't have this extra layer. So as I said before, when I not speak Chinese or any other language I learned, usually I don't need this extra layer. Sometimes I do, but the idea, of course, is when reaching fluency, when doing it a few times, so that I know the information directly. So I don't need the extra layer anymore. But if I don't know it directly, I have the extra layer as a fallback option. So I make more images. I use my mind in a way it has all the capacity, so it's just way easier to get the material in and then to still naturalize it. So that's why I think it's useful. Also on the natural language learning, to give a quote which is not by me, but in Nijmegen we also have the Max Planck Institute for Psycholinguistics, so a whole institute just studying how language learning happens basically. And I love a quote. He's not even doing memory training in any way, but the director of this institute often is also invited to give public talks. And there's often this question like, when I learn a foreign language, why can't I learn it like a child, like I learned my first language? Because many people have the idea like as a child you learn a language very easily, very simply. And he often answers it a bit ironically saying, well, so you want to learn a language like you learned it as a child. So you want to spend 5 to 6 years doing nearly nothing else, and then you have the lingual level of an elementary school kid. Is that what you mean? And then people start to say, no, that's not what I actually meant. but that's what it is. We as adults can learn a new language way faster and better than we learned a language as a child. We see one exception, the pronunciation. Because our brain, when we're born, is meant to learn all the ways to pronounce all the tones and loses it. So pronunciation is really hard. But the actual learning of the languages, also of the words, even of the grammar, we are way faster as adults, even as older adults, than as childs. If you see the hours, the time childs have to put in to learn the language just to achieve a basic level, that's actually not that impressive at the end. And therefore this extra layer, as I said, it helps me to get the material in, but it's not the idea to keep it. So maybe your mom with the words, because she doesn't practice English often enough, doesn't use it often enough, she's not getting this one step further where she can get rid of the extra layer. But I would still recommend using this extra layer of Chinese associations in her case to get the words in. And then try to produce English language to get rid of this extra layer. Alexandra?
Good question. But when it comes to a child, and especially if they're raised in a bilingual family, and the language that they speak within the family from when he was born is not English, and then they go to kindergarten, and then in a month or two, they're not being taught 6 or 8 hours in a day all the alphabet and English words in particular. All they do is just listen to their, nannies or kids speak, and then in 2 months all they want is to speak English. So in that way, that's their second language that they're building up, but it's not particularly similar to what their first language is, and they're still kids. But how do you explain that? Because they're not putting that much time.
I'm disagreeing on one of the points you said, is how much time they put in. So in Nijmegen, because there's some research about it, this only happens if they really hear English at least 40% of all the language they hear. So underneath it, they still struggle a lot picking up the language. So if they really have to attend kindergarten on a daily basis for that to pick up, and it needs to be a few hours a day. If it's just like a nanny 2 hours in the morning, it's not happening. So the threshold isn't that low as you might think. So it's actually quite a bit of a threshold on how much input it is. Also, to really see this progress in just a couple of months usually means that, well, they never spoke it at home. They still grew up in an environment where they heard the language. That happens before you're even born. Like you're still in the womb, the sounds come in damped, but it already builds up your ability to pick up the language later. Kids who move, maybe age 3 or 4 or 5, already need quite a bit more time to achieve that level. But of course, they still pick it up really fast. And in particular, the pronunciation, these kind of things, at this brain level, the brain at this moment, people, I don't know if anyone here studies developmental brains. It's not my area of expertise, so I can't really go into details of that. But the brain is then, of course, really meant also to do not much else than learn. Not to apply, but just to take in to learn. But again, like maybe the message might be, the threshold might not be that low than you think. So it's actually kind of a couple of hours a day they need to hear to actually achieve that.